And we're back. The MCU recap leading up to Avengers Doomsday continues. Phase 1, for what it was a pretty undeniably massive success. Not every movie blew the roof off, but the way it built to the event that was the first Avengers film firmly established the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the hottest franchise in Hollywood. So how do you follow that up? Well, turns out with a second phase that reaches new heights, but is also a little bit of a mixed bag. So let's go through each Phase 2 movie, spoilers ahead, starting with Iron Man 3. Following up a film as popular as The Avengers was going to be a tough task, and I think that could be a reason for why this film was met with a pretty lukewarm reception upon release. In this way, it suffers the same problem as Iron Man 2, having to live up to a slightly unexpectedly really great predecessor. But also, much like Iron Man 2, I think it's an underrated banger in the MCU lineup. The film follows Tony Stark post-Avengers dealing with some PTSD from fighting aliens and all that. This leads to him building a million new suits and having some relationship troubles with Pepper, plus he's got to deal with this terrorist, the Mandarin, who's causing all sorts of trouble. And eventually, this leads a lot of the film to be focused on Tony out of the suit, getting his shit together in a small town in Tennessee. Now, I can see why this might piss some people off, in a similar vein to Batman not being all that present in The Dark Knight Rises. But I actually really like what this did for Tony Stark's character. A lot of these films these days don't actually have arcs for their characters. It's just generic hero story, generic hero action, none of it really matters. Here, there is actually a point to the movie. Tony Stark has to realize he's more than just the armor, which is ironic in a welcome way, since in this movie he has 50 new different suits. He has to come to terms with who he is, his place in this crazy superhero world. It's not as compelling as his arc in the first film, but it's pretty well done. Plus, beyond the psychology of Tony, seeing him actually have to use his intelligence to create traps and makeshift weapons brings us back to the cleverness of this character, and makes parts of the film more interesting than if he just had the suit that could do it all for him. And on it being well done, part of what makes this whole arc with Harley the Kid in Tennessee good is that it is actually funny and well written. This movie does have a slightly different sense of humor from the first two Iron Man movies. It is a little more in line with the Joss Whedon-y Avengers humor than the slightly more edgier adult Jon Favreau humor, but the screenplay, co-written by Shane Black, has lots of hilarious moments.
So now you're just gonna leave me here, like my dad?
Yeah.
Some fun, idiosyncratic bits. As evidenced by Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, he knows how to write for a sarcastic, witty guy like RDJ, and that comes across here. On the screenplay, something else people didn't like about this film, though the vitriol for it has come down over the years, is the Mandarin twist. That Ben Kingsley's Mandarin isn't actually the Mandarin. He's
Trevor Slattery.
But I've honestly never disliked this. Granted, I can understand the initial dismay if you're a comic fan and the Mandarin is your favorite villain, though if that's the case, I've got a couple of other questions for you. But I think purely for this film, it works as a twist. It is genuinely surprising. I feel like no one saw this coming. How often can you say that about a twist in a comic book film? And it's funny. I think Ben Kingsley's kind of hilarious in this. I would direct more of a complaint towards Guy Pearce's Aldrich Killian not being that interesting of the actual villain. Like, that hurts this twist more than anything else for me, that the Mandarin's replacement is kind of just a generic MCU villain with fire shooting powers, and his motivation is kind of stupid, and yeah, I get that complaint. But the Ben Kingsley Mandarin stuff, I'm quite okay with. Action-wise, I think this is solid. The Air Force One sequence is pretty spectacular. The scene where his house gets missiled is pretty cool. The finale's okay. I will say this was the first time I started to not love the Iron Man suits, which is a problem that gets worse as these go. There are still cool moments here, and the concept of the Mark 42 is pretty neat. This is still way cooler than nanotech, but I just really love the metallic weight that the suits have in the first two Iron Man films and the Avengers. And in this one, there are so many of them, and they get ripped through like wet tissue paper. It just sort of cheapens the badassery of the whole Iron Man concept for me. I also do go back and forth a bit on Tony's relationship with Pepper, whether it's actually sweet and interesting or if it's just kind of tediously repetitive. In this film, I think they're pretty charming together. There are complaints you can have with the story in terms of logical flaws. I do feel like my image of that is exacerbated by the fact that this came out right at the genesis of YouTube deep dive nitpicks into superhero movies. I feel like I know every major and minor plot hole from every 2012 to 2014 superhero movie, but there's nothing movie-breaking here, in my opinion. It does do the classic MCU thing where some big decision happens at the end of the film, in this case Tony blowing up all his suits and deciding to be with Pepper instead of superheroing, that is then immediately rendered pointless by the next film where we need Iron Man again. But that's not really this movie's fault. Also, just a random note, but I have to say it, I love the music here. MCU movies get a lot of grief for having generic superhero scores. Maybe it's just because I have nostalgia for it, but to this day, I can still hum the main theme from Iron Man 3. Overall, I'm a big Iron Man 3 enjoyer, and I honestly think all of the Iron Man movies are of a pretty high standard. This trilogy is pretty damn great. You can see why this character was the figurehead of this franchise. Not just that the character and the performance are good, but the movies themselves were highly entertaining, well-written, fun superhero movies. It's not a mind-blowing, paradigm-shifting superhero movie, but it's funny, exciting, and gives us a slightly different approach to the character of Tony Stark. Stark, that I think keeps it relatively fresh amongst the MCU film lineup. I'll give Iron Man 3 4 stars. Also, by the way, as a fun bonus, I will note that 2013 is around the time I actually started making videos, and I don't even mean for YouTube yet. Before I made this channel, I did just film lots of videos, both for fun and anticipation of one day making a YouTube channel, where I could then post these and share with the world my brilliant insights. And so we can actually go back and check out live what did 11-year-old BHL Hudson think about Iron Man 3.
I'm reviewing Iron Man 3 today. Why? Because it's awesome. It was awesome, frankly. It was really good. I'm not a reader of comics, personally, so I really didn't have a problem with the Mandarin thing. There were a couple of plot holes, of course, and I'm not sure how they're going to build around him removing the arc reactor and blowing up all of his suits in Avengers 2 Age of Ultron, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait. I will give this movie exactly 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. Stay tuned for more awesomeness. See you next time. Bye.
Wow. Very insightful. I also like that I kind of still speak the same way. I still have the same cadences in my speech. Next up, we have Thor The Dark World. For a long time thought of as a major low point in the MCU, and while looking back in 2026, I don't think it's all that. Yeah, it's not great either. This is the definition of okay. With the exception of one part of this movie, it does nothing exceptional. It is perfectly serviceable. It was pretty fun for an 11-year-old seeing it in the cinema, as we'll see later on. It's entirely inoffensive, if not maybe a little annoying at times. It's not a movie I ever think about or want to rewatch. Thor, as he was in his first film and the Avengers, is a fine hero. Hemsworth isn't bad, but the character is just so dull in this. In the first film, you at least had his arc from outcast to hero and the fish out of water stuff. In the Avengers, you have him teamed up with lots of other interesting characters, letting him be one fun wrinkle in the team. He has people to play off of. Here, there is nothing interesting about him, really. He's just the buff superhero who fights the bad guy. It's Saturday morning cartoon feel. Same with the villain. Eccleston is fine. The makeup is sort of cool, I guess, but there's nothing to him, really. The action's fine. The movie looks fine, besides the Dark Elf planet bit that in hindsight looks kind of janky. It's all just standard. The standout thing here is the returning Asgardian cast, specifically Hiddleston. You do still have Hopkins and Rene Russo, it's always good to see them, but Tom Hiddleston's Loki carries this movie on his back. Without him, this is probably the most boring MCU movie. He's found his footing now as a character. He's villainous and mischievous, but charismatic and likable. He has the comedic beats of the film that actually land. He does the Captain America transformation, which is a bit that I loved as a kid. There's a reason this was all anyone was talking about coming out of this film. I remember everyone saying, no more Thor movies, we need a Loki movie, and that is justifiable, because he steals this movie 100%. On the actual negatives side of things, beyond this just being bland, the love story is so bland that it actually veers into being bad. Like, Hemsworth and Portman don't have negative chemistry, but even compared to the first film, where it already wasn't amazing, there's nothing to this romance. Similarly, Kat Dennings wasn't very annoying in the first film, in my opinion. Here they dial up the quirky side character jokes, and she gets her own quirky side character, and yeah, it's overdone and annoying. It's almost impressive you spend this much time with quote-unquote wacky characters, and it still does not give the movie any personality. The last thing I'll say here, something that normally I wouldn't really complain about, but since I'm going off here, this also just feels so inconsequential in the larger MCU. I think that criticism is sometimes stupid, like, oh, there weren't enough cameos, there weren't enough setups. Those are fun, but those do not a good movie make on their own. But here, beyond giving us the Reality Stone and the mom death thing that they revisit in Endgame, like, what matters here? Even just for these characters within this film. Like, Loki dies, but then he didn't. Thor and Jane aren't together, except they are, except they aren't. It's just so skippable in terms of quality and in terms of story content. All in all, I've had Thor 2 at 3 stars for a long time and maintained that, yeah, it's not great, but it's not bad. But actually writing out my thoughts on it, I feel like I've convinced myself to drop this to a 2.5. It is watchable, I guess, but in the same way that plain crackers are edible. You can do it, it just won't be very interesting. Also, finally, let's take a little look at what I thought of this film when it was released. And also, I made my YouTube channel shortly after this came out, and this was one of the first movies I reviewed, maybe the first.
I thought the movie was really good. It was a lot better than the first one, and I have high hopes for a third installment. The acting was also really great, especially from Tom Hiddleston's Loki, which was the best performance in the film, and I think should have at least gotten an Oscar nod for Best Supporting Actor. Like any movie, it had a lot of convenient plot points and a few big plot holes, but in the end, the pros clearly outweigh the cons. Despite some minor complaints and the bad guy kind of being meh, Thor The Dark World is a really good movie. Overall, I would give this movie 7 out of 10.
Now we enter truly one of the most goated superhero movie years of all time, 2014, with two films that I think were essential to the MCU's continued success. Iron Man 3, Thor 2, these were met with sort of lukewarm responses. These next two films got people talking about the MCU and the new exciting directions it was going to go. The first film being Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This movie is also important to the MCU as it introduced the Russo directing team, and also it made Captain America badass. I already thought he was badass from his first film, but that was maybe just me. And yeah, I'll admit he's a total bitch in the Avengers. But here they managed to make the character's earnestness endearing instead of lame. And they did that by putting him in a morally gray situation where having a good moral compass is badass. In his first film in the Avengers, where there's very clear good and evil sides, of course he's going to be on the right side, but then you have him with other characters who are also on the right side and are also cool about it, he's going to look less cool by comparison. The guy going like, actually that's against the rules, is always going to be sort of lame. But here, in a world where you don't know who to trust, everyone around you is some super spy with agendas and murky ideas about how we should kill all threats before they commit any crimes. Insane move from Nick Fury here, by the way. I know it gets hijacked by Nazis, but this plan was already wild from the start. But then, in that case, someone standing up steadfastly for his morals makes him admirable and cool. Plus, aesthetically, I think it helped a lot that they fixed whatever was going on with his hair, and made his suit less puffy and way sleeker, and made his action scenes awesome, and the movie itself more intense and grounded. The tone the Russo brothers brought to this movie is just fantastic. I know it's a bit exaggerated in hindsight to be like, this movie is so dark, so morally gray, so grounded. It is still a Marvel movie, but that's honestly part of the beauty of some of the best MCU movies, including the next one we'll talk about. They're able to dabble in different genres while still keeping the feel of something that could exist in the overall continuity. And the spy thriller vibes that are brought to this are appropriate for this kind of film and make it stand out in the MCU lineup while still offering some of the quips and tie-ins and familiar aspects of this series. And on that tone, that vaguely bourne spy thriller tone, the action, man, this is by far the most well-done action in the MCU. Who would have thought the Russos off of Me, You, and Dupree and Community could do this sort of thing? Though actually, don't count out the Community action scenes. Some of those go hard. But the hand-to-hand fight scenes here are so cool. They're just shaky and quick-cut enough to make them intense, but you can still tell what's going on. The sweet spot. Also, I love how real and brutal it feels, especially compared to some other superhero movie action. Even kind of some later Russo action. These scenes feel real. The damage feels real. There's weight to it. Like, Cap just straight up kicked this dude off this boat. That guy got fucked up. No two ways about it. This also has such a stellar cast. Anthony Mackie is a very likable presence in the MCU. Cap and Natasha's dynamic is a lot of fun, what with her bringing kind of the opposite of his earnest Boy Scoutness. This is probably Sam Jackson's best performance in the MCU. Also, he gets maybe the coolest action scene in the film. They got goddamn Robert Redford to be in a Marvel movie, and he kills it. And like I've talked about before, it's such great casting for such a high-up, prestigious position in the MCU to get such a prestigious actor. It adds this subconscious layer in the viewer's mind of authority to him that really makes the performance and the character. Sebastian Stan is great as the Winter Soldier. I love his theme that they introduced here. And speaking of introducing things, unlike Thor 2, this movie feels extremely consequential to the MCU. S.H.I.E.L.D. was a big deal in this universe back then. They had a whole TV show for some reason. And for this seemingly innocuous movie in the lineup, oh yeah, Captain America sequel, to dramatically change one of the backbones of this world, it was pretty crazy. I feel like this also helped solidify the whole cinematic universe aspect of these movies. Now it's gotten a bit annoying, where you have to see every movie to understand what happens in the next one, and there's too much stuff to watch, but this made it feel more like anything can happen to this universe in any of these films, so you gotta tune in. Not like it's homework where you have to know what happened, but you want to see what the fuck is gonna happen this time, what's gonna change. And it's a great crazy twist, that the government and high-level intelligence agencies have been infiltrated by secret Nazis. That's wild. I mean, can you imagine a world where the government was taken over by secret Nazis? That'd be crazy. There's emotion here too, Bucky and Steve's friendship being the through line in that big end of the line scene. That got me good when I first watched this. Same with seeing Peggy again. I was really invested in their relationship, so this scene had me a bit emotional, and it highlights Cap's isolation in the modern world, which is another interesting, well-done part of the film. It's also well-paced. This movie's just great. In terms of negatives, there's not much here. I mean, his relationship with Peggy's niece is a little weird, but it only gets weird in Civil War, really. Like I mentioned before, the plot is kind of stupid or unbelievable at times. Specifically the part where S.H.I.E.L.D., who are supposed to be the good guys, build a giant fleet of death ships to kill people who a computer deems could be a threat in the future before they've done anything. Granted, that's part of the whole moral ambiguity, who are the good guys, the modern world is murky, etc. But there are a few different aspects of that story that in hindsight make you raise your eyebrows a bit. Like again, maybe this isn't too far off from actual real world stuff that will happen in the future. Kind of scary. But in this superhero world, Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., they wouldn't note that this was a bad idea for multiple reasons. Even not moral, the fact that someone else could maybe get a hold of this technology. And I mean, Come on. Also, the actual logistics of how Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and stayed secret for all this time, if you think about it for too long, there could be some holes there. But overall, Captain America the Winter Soldier is an awesome superhero movie. It's intense and fun and action-packed, and had big ramifications for this franchise both in-universe and out. I'll give it 4 stars. And real quick, let's see what the Beecher Hudson verdict was back in 2014.
Anthony Mackie said, "It's more of a story movie than an action movie, but the action scenes are the most amazing thing you've ever seen. It is also the darkest and deepest Avengers film, with commentary on things like the government and espionage. In my opinion, this is the movie with the best supporting characters I've ever seen. As you can tell, I really love this movie. Overall, I give Captain America the Winter Soldier 9 out of 10.
We then come to what for a while I would have called my favorite MCU movie, and honestly it still might be. James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy. I would argue this was the first outright comedy movie in the MCU. Iron Man and the Avengers certainly have overt comedic elements, and all these movies have jokes in them, but this was the first time an MCU movie embraced committing to the full-on silliness of a comedy, which as we'll see going forward has varying results, but here it works brilliantly. Like The Winter Soldier, incorporating elements of the spy thriller genre without losing the MCU-ness of it all, this film manages to be more comedic than previous MCU movies without losing the core elements of what also makes this franchise enjoyable and recognizable. It still takes itself seriously enough where you can have cool hero moments and building of the universe and emotional payoffs. It's not just nonsense. But on the comedy, that comes from James Gunn and the chemistry of this cast. This is where Gunn's humor has been the most refined for me. Maybe who he co-wrote this with, Nicole Perlman, helped add some kind of balance. But these days, I think Gunn is like a 70-30 director for me in terms of jokes landing. In Guardians 1, it's like 90-10. I've said before this might be my favorite cinema crowd experience I've ever had. Full house with people lined up to get in, everyone laughing their asses off. It was the quintessential comedy cinema experience. And the interplay between the characters is so good. This is one of the best cast MCU movies by far. Chris Pratt, for whatever's happened to him now, is great as the obnoxious but lovable hero. Zoe Saldana and Dave Bautista nail their roles. Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel are perfect for theirs. And the wackiness of these characters feels authentically weird in a funny way. Perhaps it's oversaturation, but nowadays I don't really get a kick out of the weird superhero character thing, where someone in the movie goes, "Wait, you're telling me your name is Bug Man? Well, I never. That is so crazy and weird." Like, we've done this a million times now. It's a comic book movie. Weird stuff will happen. But back when this came out, having a talking tree and a raccoon pirate was actually unique and strange and funny in how absurd it was. It had an original feel to it, and it made it all the cooler when you got genuinely invested in that talking tree and raccoon pirate. And the fact that these characters are kind of bad people, or bad creatures, makes for a bit of an edgier, more interesting movie. Like, no hero in a Marvel movie is really going to be a bad person, but they go to some lengths to show how either morally flexible these characters are, or at the very least how screwed up they all are, and that actually adds quite a bit to their characters. The bit where Rocket gets drunk and is yelling about how he didn't ask to get made and all that, it adds some layers, a bit of edge that you don't get in every Marvel movie. Speaking of things that might seem cliche but felt fresh here, the use of the 70s pop music. It's great. Every movie has this now, classic pop music. And I'm aware movies used pop music before this, including some of the same songs, but this was one of the first movies I saw do this. This wasn't as oversaturated back then, and the way it incorporates the music really works for the story. The songs fit perfectly for the scenes they're in. There was clearly thought put into this, as opposed to some movies where it just feels like they hit shuffle on a Spotify playlist. And this movie did introduce me to these songs. I've been listening to this music since the summer of 2014. I remember putting these songs on in school during the lunch break on the projector. We would have a little dance party in the classroom, like, those are good times. That's gotta count for something. And not for nothing, I like the actual score as well. Like Iron Man 3, maybe I'm the only person who can hum this, but I can hum it to this day. There's some pretty great visuals here, not just with this being an effects-heavy movie and the effects being pretty flawless and holding up to this day, from characters to backgrounds, but some of the colors and the space scenes, come on. And the action is above standard. There's nothing that insane here, but there are lots of fun sequences like the prison break. The final battle has a lot going on, it's pretty thrilling. It generally integrates the humor well into the action. You can always tell what's going on. It's good. Now, regarding stuff that doesn't work as well, there are a couple of typical MCU problems here. I actually like Ronan as a villain. I think his design and voice are kind of cool. I remember when he hits that guy with the hammer, that was pretty intense. But in terms of actual backstory or motivation, yeah, he's pretty thin. There are also some slightly odd scenes that definitely do not feel like they flow with the rest of the film. Some seem like they were mandated by Marvel, others just feel like a strange choice, like the opening with Peter Quill's dying mom. It's an emotional scene, and it does establish an investment early on in this character and his journey and how much his mom means to him, which comes comes back with a genuinely beautiful ending with the Volume 2 tape. That low-key still makes me tear up. But it is just a little strange feeling to open such a goofy movie with such a harrowing, somber scene. Like, the dance scene is the perfect tone setter for this movie. This opening scene on rewatches feels a bit like an odd way to kick it off, but I guess I get it. But the Thanos scene also, that just feels weird in lots of ways. It's this big bad in the MCU who we've only seen briefly teased up until this point, and now he just sort of turns around and he's there. He just seems like another big, shadowy boss bad guy. Like, there isn't really any aura to him or how the scene is done. He's just kind of there. And compared to the fun and style of the rest of the film, the scenes with Thanos do feel a bit like, and we're gonna pause for a second to do a little setting up of a future character. Here he is, remember him. He has a role to play in this movie, and they're not bad scenes. And in general, I think it's cool how they built up Thanos throughout these movies, but the scenes themselves I think could have been integrated a little more smoothly, and have been done in a way that makes Thanos seem more important and badass to this universe. And finally, I know it's a beloved part of the film, and I know I talked about how much I enjoy the comedic style of it on the whole, but the dance battle at the end has always rubbed me slightly the wrong way. It's fun, but even as a 12-year-old, especially when I was invested in this big final battle, I did feel like it jumped the shark a little and was a bit too silly, even for this movie, particularly in such a climactic moment. But it is sort of funny, and we still get the proper cool climactic moment after that, so yeah, it's not that deep. Overall, Guardians of the Galaxy remains one of the most fun superhero blockbusters you can watch. There's a reason it was able to launch basically a whole new corner of the MCU and James Gunn's now massive place in the superhero movie landscape. It still holds up as one of, if not the best MCU movie. I'll give Guardians of the Galaxy 4.5 stars out of 5. And what did I think of it back in 2014?
Anyway, I loved this movie. I was really excited for it, but I was quite nervous that I would be disappointed. I'm gonna be honest, I like this movie as much as Captain America the Winter Soldier. I like this movie as much as X-Men Days of Future Past. And in the end, I give Guardians of the Galaxy a 9.8 out of 10.
We then come to the much anticipated follow-up to 2012's Avengers, Avengers Age of Ultron. I don't think you understand how excited I was for this movie. This was back when I was at the age that I would get genuinely immeasurable expectations for a film that were virtually impossible to live up to, and yeah, this movie did not live up to them. I'm not kidding, this is a true story. When I came home from the cinema from seeing Avengers 2, I actually started tearing up because I was that disappointed. It wasn't even a visceral anger or sadness. I think I just built up this moment so much in my head that it not being the exact payoff I wanted, it not giving me the same feeling that the first one did, was emotionally weird for me. And that manifested in a couple of tears. I remember my mom being like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? To be young. That being said, if you watch my original review, you can see I ended up coping hard and giving it a 9 out of 10.
It's a great summer blockbuster and is a great movie to go out and have a good time with. It's not complicated, it doesn't have a spectacular plot, you're not gonna cry, it isn't Citizen Kane 2, but I'd highly recommend it, especially to Marvel fans. There were a few things that I didn't like, but overall, I give it a 9 out of 10.
Looking back on it, it is no 9 out of 10. It is, however, also not so disappointing as to warrant teary eyes. It felt like a bigger deal at the time because this was the only other Avengers movie we'd gotten. In the broader context of the MCU now, this feels like, oh yeah, that other Avengers movie we got. It's not that deep. It has its moments, it has its faults. Let's talk about it. From the opening scene, you can tell something's a bit off about this. This was the exact moment when 13-year-old me started to get a bit weary. This movie on the whole looks kinda bad. The first Avengers does have a bit of this flatly lit, bright colors Disney Channel look at times, but it always looked at least real to me, like real people on real sets. There is something about how this film is lit or color corrected that just makes it look faker. It's one of the first Marvel movies I remember looking artificial, which is a problem I continue to have with many of them, even ones I like. And that opening one-shot action scene is supposed to be this epic Avengers are back moment, but all these guys look like CGI rubbery people. It's not like Matrix 2 bad, but they look like well-animated action figures, and that just makes it lose all of its cool factor for me. The next thing that I felt was off about this is that the quips are less funny and more annoying here. And I don't think it's because I got older between these movies. I think honestly what annoys me more is less the quips, but the action scene catchphrases. Like I remember so distinctly there's a part where Black Widow is riding a motorcycle through the streets chasing Ultron or something, and she says beep beep.
You can draw out the guards.
Let's find out.
Beep beep.
And in the cinema, I was just like, fuck off. I don't know why that pissed me off so much. Partially because Black Widow doesn't seem like a character who would say that. Partially because it makes it feel like a lamer, more babyish movie, and I didn't want to feel like that when I was so invested in this. But just generally throughout, there are more lines and quips and moments that feel sort of forced and annoying, especially in comparison to the first one. That being said, this team of actors still certainly has its chemistry, and the film still has its fun moments. Everyone agrees on this, but the party scene is easily the highlight of the fun team banter in this film, the Thor hammer lifting bit. That is genuinely funny and clever and well done. again, that feels like a creative way to add more of a friend dynamic to this team. And to be honest, going back to this film now, there is a bit of fun in just the novelty of seeing all these characters together again. Now that we're at this point and we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel of like, okay, we have Ant-Man and the Eternals and some of the Guardians are left, I guess. To go back and see all the main characters, all the main actors, all interacting together, something that would be crazy to see now, back when that was just what this universe was, it is a little bit cool. I'm not sure how much credit I can give to the movie for that though. The film does try to give us a bit more characterization for these heroes, and the results are mixed. It clearly improves on the first film's treatment of Hawkeye, giving him a farm and a family and us some more time with him helps to make him not just Avenger number 6. But I'll be honest, everything else that's going on Hawkeye's farm feels sort of forced. Steve and Tony's conflict, while it's cool in setting up Civil War, if you rewatch that scene, it does feel a bit staged for whatever reason. I know it's a movie, but more so than usual for characters who otherwise usually have believable interactions with each other. And Bruce and Natasha's romance is just weird and off-putting. Not only do they not really have any chemistry, but the scene where Natasha talks about her forced sterilization is kind of very out of place. Like, that's some dark, heavy stuff, and it could certainly make for some interesting character development and add layers to her relationship with Bruce, but because it's dropped in the middle of this very quick-moving Marvel team-up movie with tons of characters and action scenes and quips, it's not given enough time to breathe, and so ends up feeling like a shockingly intense revelation just dropped in real quick and we're moving on. I think they had the right idea with humanizing such a cold, calculated spy character, but the execution could have been better. In terms of new characters introduced here, Wanda and Pietro are fine. They're quite cool power-wise. Those add a new dynamic to the action, but the accents are inescapably quite goofy.
Is that why you've come? To end the Avengers?
And I don't really think they found their footing with Wanda until later films and shows. Ultron as a villain is very badass. I'm not sure if all the CGI has aged fantastically, but in general he looks great, and James Spader is perfectly cast as the voice of this sarcastic, sinister robot. You believe he can match wits with Tony Stark. And his motivations and origin and ideology are at the very least more interesting than most MCU villains. The scene of him and Vision talking at the end is one of the highlights of the film. Honestly, I wish we could have gotten a bit more of Ultron in these movies. I feel like there's a lot that could be explored there, and he was just a cool villain. Also, yeah, Vision's in this. He's pretty cool too, not doing that much yet, but it is his first movie. He gets some cool action moments, and him lifting up the hammer is another one of the best moments in the film. On the film's action scenes, there is some pretty spectacular stuff here, namely the Hulkbuster fight. That lived up to the very high expectations I had of it from the trailer. The other fights are mostly fine, there's an okay chase scene in there, and the big final battle is okay, but it is just a less fun repeat of Avengers 1. It's the Avengers fighting a big generic army, but it's grayer and looks less real, and it's less dynamic, there are less civilians around, so it's less tense, and the novelty of it being the Avengers teaming up is gone, and yeah, it has its fun action beats, the moment with Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch is nice, but it's a generic army fight. And finally, the post-credit scene I feel like sums up this movie to a T. It's just Thanos prepping to fight the Avengers. Now this is representative of this movie because it does the same thing from the first movie, but less cool, without the element of a reveal. It's less cleverly done. It doesn't really give us any new information. I mean, from Avengers and Guardians and the announcement of Infinity War, you could make the assumption that yes, Thanos is coming to get the Infinity Stones and fight the Avengers. Gotcha. It feels a bit like a last-minute addition, or like they couldn't do another idea, so they were just like, okay, throw this in. It's fine, but sort of a poor man's version of the first film, which is kind of how I feel about the movie in general. Overall, Avengers Age of Ultron is far from the worst MCU movie. The natural coolness of seeing these characters together is still here. It did add a lot of new elements to the MCU. It has action beats and funny moments that keep it watchable. It is just not as exciting or well done or original feeling as the first film, or even those two previous MCU movies. That was also a disappointing part of this. It had Winter Soldier and Guardians leading into it, two of the most fresh-feeling MCU movies to date, and it ended up feeling a bit stale. I'll give Age of Ultron 3 stars out of 5. And now, the final film of Phase 2, we've got a new hero introduction, Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. Now, because Ant-Man 2 and 3 have ended up being some of the blandest and or straight up worst movies in this series, I feel like Ant-Man 1 gets lumped in there as, yeah, those Ant-Man movies suck. But you know what? Ant-Man 1 is actually not bad, and at the very least it puts to shame the next two Ant-Man films with how much more personality it has than them. Those movies feel like, okay, we have a part of the slate to fill. Pump out an Ant-Man movie, sure. This feels like the people making it actually cared a bit and wanted to make something somewhat fun. How much of this is carried over from what Edgar Wright was working on? I have no idea, but I don't want to take credit away from the people who actually made it, because they did a good job. The first thing you notice about this film is that, like Guardians, it is a straight-up comedy. But unlike Guardians, it is more like a classic late 2000s, early 2010s American comedy. Like, does this movie look more like Age of Ultron or a Will Ferrell movie? Now, I know immediately that could lead to complaints, because those types of comedies are famously shot really flatly and look really boring. And there is a bit of that here. The whole movie, no pun intended, does feel quite small scale. Not just like a more street level adventure, but like borderline low budget. Like they spent a lot of this movie in the Hank Pym house. But I have to say, I don't mind the American comedy movie style of it really, because it's a good version of that movie. It's a better comedy than most Will Ferrell comedies. And in comparison to how generic MCU-ified the next two entries feel, this actually allows the movie to have its own voice a little bit. Whether or not you think the gags are funny, that's one thing, but they have the Baskin-Robbins bit, the Luis telling stories bit, the latter of which I do think is actually really funny. You can think it's lame humor, but I wouldn't really call this MCU humor. In the modern sense, MCU humor is now like synthesized in a test tube humor. Okay, we've done 3 punches in the action scene, now he says a little quip, got it? Like this and Guardians have styles of humor that you can think are corny, but at least they feel like they were written by a person, not just a committee doing a template-feeling overload of quips. And honestly, I think Ant-Man has plenty of funny moments. Paul Rudd is a fun addition to the MCU. He's always suitably charming, even in the worst movies he's in. It's cool to see Michael Douglas in one of these. He's fine, he doesn't do too much. Evangeline Lilly is also solid. Honestly, the highlights of the cast are Michael Pena, David Dastmalchian, and T.I. as the buddies. Like I said before, I still get a kick out of the Luis storytelling bits. That's some of the funnier stuff the MCU has ever done. Also on his friends, not that this film fully commits to being an Ocean's 11 type heist movie, but like Winter Soldier integrating spy thriller stuff, this movie's integration of heist movie elements is fun, and makes it stand out just a tiny bit more. I do love a planning and executing heist bit in a film. And I have to say, the other big one-up this film has over its 2 follow-ups, particularly the third one, is that it does fun stuff with the premise of Ant-Man. Ant-Man and the Wasp does some of this, I guess, but this still baffles me about Quantumania. The entire point of Ant-Man as a superhero, the thing that makes him unique amongst these heroes, and can give him some fun cinematic action scenes, is that he changes size. He shrinks. So things that are normal sized for us are huge for him. Isn't that fun? And in that movie, they were like, but what if we put him in an environment where it doesn't matter what size he is? Like, what? But here you get your money's worth for the shrinking superhero stuff. When he first tests the suit and he's running around the apartment, that's a lot of fun. The train set bit at the end, perfect place to put an Ant-Man movie finale. It also just looks more colorful and fun than the next 2 movies. Like, it's not the prettiest looking movie ever, but just look at this compared to the grayness of the second one or the barf coloredness of the third one. Now, I've heaped quite a bit of praise on this movie. I will say there are definitely still parts of it that do not work. For all that the comedy got an occasional chuckle out of me, I could not care less about the drama in this movie. The stuff with Scott and his daughter is okay. I care insofar as Paul Rudd is likable and you want him and his kid to be happy. Like, that's pretty surface level B-roll in a commercial type stuff. I gotta be honest, I do not give a single fuck about whatever drama goes on in these movies with Hank and Hope and Janet and the Pym family saga. There may not be a storyline in the MCU I care less about, honestly. And I am including all 6 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when I say that. Darren Cross is also another pretty generic villain. I mean, he gives a decent cartoon bad guy performance, and I like the color of his suit, and his death is pretty brutal, but there isn't much to him. And the MCU tie-ins here are kinda rough. First of all, I despise this movie's opening scene. Now, when I saw this in the cinema, as someone who loves making MCU chronologies, I thought it was awesome. New wrinkles added to the timeline. But just as an opening scene for a film, it sucks. It's confusing to anyone who isn't pretty intimately caught up with the lore of this universe. It just jumps into this like it's the start of a new episode of an ABC TV show. The de-aging hasn't aged particularly well, and it doesn't remotely set the tone for the rest of the film. And unlike the Guardians opening, it's not a good scene. Like, that at least was a well-done emotional scene, even if it was a bit tonally strangely placed. This is just sort of a lore exposition dump that it feels like they had to get in there for Hank's story later on, and then someone was like, it'd be good if there were MCU characters in this, because, you know, universe synergy. I don't know, the bit with Scott where he's in prison and then talking to Luis, that sets the stage for what kind of movie this is gonna be. This is just a weird smack in the face, and we're here, it's the MCU, be sure to take in all this info. It could have been done better. I just say this because the opening scene is an art form in itself. It's how you ease the audience into it, it's how you get them invested, let them know what kind of adventure they're in for, and you can do a cold opening, but it's gotta be better than this. And the Falcon cameo feels a tad forced. Again, at the time, it was pretty hype, but it does feel a bit like something someone brought up in a meeting. Like, what if he met an Avenger? Wouldn't that be good to tie this together? The scene itself is kind of fun, but also I don't think it's helped by the fact that this doesn't feel like they're at the Avengers facility. Like, why is it literally deserted? I don't need other heroes there, but there are no humans, no personnel. It just makes it feel like it's not real. And again, a bit like a let's drop Falcon in this movie type moment. That's a problem with these films as they go. We'll talk about it more later, but it feels less and less like these are set in the real world because there are no civilians anywhere to be seen. But anyway, that's not that deep here. It's an okay fun scene. All in all, Ant-Man 1 has its charm. Certainly more charm than the most generic of these MCU movies. A likable cast, some funny moments, and good uses of the hero's powers for action scenes helps get you through a pretty standard, if not somewhat uninteresting plot. I'll give it 3 stars out of 5. Also, what did I think of it back in 2015?
It's a comedy, and it's a heist film with shrinking down superhero stuff in the mix, and it's pretty good. Would I recommend you see it? The style of it might put some people off, but yeah, sure, go out and see this. I mean, what are your other options? Pixels? Come on. I give it an 8.4 out of 10.
So overall, Phase 2, I think we have a great movie, a meh movie, a great movie, a great movie, an okay movie, an okay movie. Like I said, a mixed bag. Marvel was still finding its footing to some extent, how to handle having this expanded universe franchise that people were now very invested in, and had risen to be one of, if not the biggest franchise in Hollywood, and I think they did a solid job. At the very least, this phase introduced us to some new names behind the scenes that would help carry this universe forward, and showed that these movies were capable of keeping things fun and fresh, while also showcasing some of the samey genericness that would eventually be part of the MCU's decline. Anyway, I'll be back for Phase 3 in a few months. I'm doing all the phases leading up to Doomsday, so subscribe for that, and for other content I make here. We do lots of movie, TV stuff. But what do you think of these movies? And what's it like to look back on them now from where we and the MCU are in 2026? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. While you're at it, be sure to like this video, check out my second channel where I have more casual film and pop culture conversations, BHL 2, check out my movie and TV podcast, The Poorly Planned Podcast, my Instagram at BHL_Hudson, my Letterboxd at RealBHLHudson, and subscribe for more videos like the one you just watched. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.